Baldridge. Where were you born?
I was born in eastern Kentucky in 1955. Eastern Kentucky, for those of you who don't know, is in the mountains of Kentucky. It's a coal mining region. Actually, it's the largest producer of coal in the world. It's a different world from the Grange or anywhere else I've ever been.
What was your family life like when you were a little kid growing up?
Pretty much everyone in the coal region was poor. You usually had two classes of people. You had the poor and basically had the destitute people, but we were only poor financially. I mean, we had streams to fish in, we had mountains to hunt, we had friends, we had a nice social life with church-going people. It was, all in all, a great place to grow up in.
What was your family like?
My father was a coal miner, naturally. My mother was a homemaker. My father happened to be the biggest influence on my life. We were very close. His name was Toby, and I was called Little Toby up until he died when I was 6 years old. After that, my mother went to college off and on as often as she could get the money to go. And from the time I was 6 years old till I graduated from high school, it took her that long to get her degree. She got her degree and became a school teacher.
What was life like for you when you were a teenager? What was kind of some trends, and what did you do for fun and stuff like that? Where'd you go to college?
During my childhood, we spent mostly in the 60s, but 60s in Kentucky was more like Leave It to Beaver than the hippie generation that you see on TV. We were all pretty straight and narrow kids, played a lot of sports. We had a TV that got only one channel, so we watched, it was NBC, watched a lot of Bonanza, watched a lot of Wild World of Disney, World Series when it came on. As far as fads in the 60s, like I said, we were always about 10 years behind the time. By the time I started becoming a teenager in high school, then that was the 70s, and by that time the 60s had caught up in the mountains, so we were all long hair, bell bottoms, things like that. By this time we'd probably gotten 2 or 3 more channels on our TV. Again, played a lot of sports. As far as fads, we really wasn't a lot of fads that we did. Like I said, everything was either sports related or hunting or fishing or something of that nature. I do remember, like I said, the time's changing. By the time I was in high school, I was starting to get a little worried about Vietnam. Vietnam was a pretty big issue. We all thought we might have to go to Vietnam. So Vietnam was a big issue. I remember TV was changing, times were changing. I remember when man first set foot on the moon. I remember watching Laugh In during the late 60s with my mother in the room and being very embarrassed because it was such a different radical show. Nowadays it doesn't seem so. But things were relatively quiet for people. I mean, it was just mostly work and play.
What did you do after you weren't a teenager when you met your wife?
I met my wife when I was 22. I was playing softball. And the minute I saw your mother, I knew I was going to marry her. I mean, I was always a very, very quiet, very shy person, but she was the one person that I went after in my life. I wouldn't take no for an answer. I met her. I married her just a few months later. Right off the bat, we started having kids. Every year and a half, 2 years apart. It was a little rough at first. Work was rough. But we had each other. We had 2 kids. You actually came along. Had 3 about 5 years apart, and then we laid it another 5 or 6 years before we had you. Out of all the things I've ever done in my life, I guess being a father is the thing I'm proudest of. I worked in the coal mines, and it used to bother me a lot. I mean, I used to come home, my face is all black, you couldn't wash it off. You'd get out of the tub and look at yourself in the mirror and have to jump back in. And me and my wife discussed it. We thought at some time we had to break the cycle. I was a coal miner, my father's a coal miner. Grandfather was a coal miner, probably his father was a coal miner, and that was going to be your fate, and we didn't want that. So when the opportunity arose, I went with my in-laws to Georgia to stay a few days with the intention of getting a job and possibly going back, but it didn't work out that way. I got a job, I stayed. We got you and your mother down here later, and I've been here ever since. I now am an engineer with ExxonMobil Chemical. I've got my own office. I don't have to eat coal dust. Life is quite a bit better. I do miss a lot of things. I miss the changing of the seasons we had in Kentucky. I miss my family life, my cousins, my friends. I just miss the whole area quite a bit, but this is all done for you kids.
What is really the most important thing in your life?
Most important thing in my life, basically the only thing in my life is family. Like I said, nothing pleases me more than being a dad. Nothing pleases me more to see my kids be successful, to find love, find happiness, be successful, be good kids. And so far, I've been very proud of you all. One way that I could kind of get across to how it was different for a poor Appalachian kid growing up as opposed to kids today is one time I'd got food poisoning or something, and I was in very terrible shape, doubled over. I thought I was going to die. My mother thought I was going to die. Instead of taking us to the doctor, which was not an option, she took me up and laid me on the porch, and I was either going to die or get better. She wouldn't even let the kids, my brother and sister, come around me because she said I might die. So she sat there with me several hours, and if I would have died, I would have died right there on the porch without ever getting, to go to a doctor. But eventually, I got better and didn't have to do that. Can you stop?